She lived for a while inside an abandoned, half-built structure with a man she thought was just another penniless beggar. What she didn't know was that this so-called destitute stranger was in fact a billionaire hiding in plain sight, a man with secrets powerful enough to transform her life forever. But why would someone with limitless wealth choose to live like he had nothing? And what happens when his hidden truth is finally revealed? Grab your popcorn, settle in, and let's step into this story. On the noisy, bustling streets of Calabar City, a young woman named Elena sat silently on the roadside pavement. She clutched a small, worn bag tightly to her chest as though it was her last anchor in the world. Her stomach growled painfully, she had not eaten since morning, and hunger gnawed at her insides. The day had dragged on endlessly, the sun was dipping behind the skyline, and her eyes carried the weight of hopelessness. There were a few crumpled notes inside her bag, hardly enough to change her fate, but at least they could buy her something small to eat. With trembling steps, she rose from the pavement and left the crowded road behind, searching for food. After walking for some time, she spotted a woman selling meals from a roadside stand. With the last of her money, Elena purchased a single plate of rice. To others it was nothing more than an ordinary meal, but to Elena, it felt like treasure, the only thing she had all day. She walked away with her plate of rice and a sachet of water, found a quiet corner, and prepared to eat in peace. But before she could even lift her first spoonful, she noticed someone standing in front of her. Looking up, she froze in shock. A man was standing there. His hair was dusty, his face unshaven and rough, his clothes torn and filthy. His hands shook as he held out an empty plastic plate. His voice cracked as he spoke. "Please, Ma, a little food. I'm starving. I haven't eaten in days." A rush of anger surged through Elena. She herself was exhausted and hungry. This rice was her only meal of the day, and she doubted if it would even satisfy her own hunger, let alone share it with someone else. "Go away," she snapped sharply. "I barely have enough for myself." The stranger lowered his head in silence. He didn't argue, didn't beg again. He simply turned and began to walk away slowly. Elena's eyes followed him, and guilt twisted inside her chest. She thought of her own struggles, of all the times she had wished for kindness, a helping hand, a single act of mercy. She imagined the pain in his heart, and suddenly she couldn't bear it. "Wait," she called softly. The man stopped, surprised, and turned around. His eyes widened when he realized it was the same woman who had just rejected him. Elena lifted her plate, divided the rice into 2 portions, and poured half into his empty dish. She gestured for him to sit. Tears welled in his eyes as he murmured blessings under his breath. "Thank you, Ma. God bless you. You will never lack," he whispered with gratitude so deep it sounded like a prayer. For the first time that day, a faint smile crossed Elena's tired face. Watching him eat so eagerly eased her heart, though her sadness remained. He devoured the food quickly, like a starving lion, but even as he ate, his eyes lingered on her. "You don't look happy," he said gently, noticing her silence. "Why aren't you eating?" Elena almost laughed bitterly. Wasn't it strange that a man in rags, begging for scraps, should ask about her troubles? How could a beggar understand the storms in her life? But something in his voice, calm, soft, almost fatherly, made her feel safe enough to speak. "I don't have anywhere to stay tonight," she admitted quietly. "I'm homeless." He didn't respond right away. Then, after a pause, he said, "There's an unfinished building where I sleep. It's not much, no doors, no windows, but it's safer than the streets. You can stay there if you want." Elena blinked in disbelief. A beggar was offering her a place to sleep. She hesitated, weighing the risk, but something about the man's gentle tone softened her fears. Against her better judgment, she decided to follow. When they arrived at the half-built structure, she saw crumbling walls and open spaces, yet it looked empty and safe enough. In one corner was a small bed with a thin blanket and a mosquito net. He explained that he had picked them off the roadside when someone threw them away. Elena gathered some cartons and arranged them into a makeshift mat on the opposite corner, resting her head on her bag as a pillow. That night, though her heart still trembled with unease, she felt grateful to at least have somewhere to lie down. She glanced at the man, whose name, she soon learned, was Victor, already curled up beneath his mosquito net, asleep. She closed her eyes at last. What she didn't know was that Victor was not at all who he seemed. The following morning, Elena awoke with a start. For a brief moment, she forgot where she was. Then she quickly sat up and looked toward the spot where Victor had slept. His blanket was empty. He was gone. Fear clawed at her chest. She rushed to open her bag with trembling hands. Everything was still there, her few clothes, her little belongings. Nothing was missing. Relief swept through her, though questions filled her mind. Where had he gone so early? Still, she had bigger worries. She needed food, and more than that, she needed a job. She dressed quickly in her cleanest clothes, hoping to look presentable, and stepped outside. To her surprise, Victor was already sitting by the roadside with a cracked plate in front of him. People walked past without sparing him a glance, some shaking their heads in pity. Elena walked over. "Good morning, sir," she said politely. He looked up at her, surprised by her tone. "Thank you, for yesterday. For giving me a place to sleep," she added. Victor smiled faintly. "It was nothing. You shared your food when I was hungry. That was the least I could do. My name is Victor." She nodded. "I'm Elena. Thank you again." He studied her silently for a moment before saying, "You can stay there as long as you need, until you find another place. It isn't much, but it's safe." A warmth she couldn't explain rose inside her chest. How strange that a man the world called a beggar could show her such kindness. With her bag on her shoulder, Elena set out again into the city to search for work. Shop after shop turned her away. By afternoon her legs ached, her throat was dry, and hunger stabbed at her stomach. Still, she pushed forward. Eventually she came across a roadside restaurant. Desperation made her step inside. "Do you need a worker?" she asked the owner nervously. "I can do anything. Please." The woman eyed her from head to toe. Without much thought, she pointed to a mountain of dirty plates at the back. "Wash those. If you do a good job, I'll pay you at the end of the day and give you food." Grateful, Elena set her bag aside and went to work. By evening her arms were sore, but the woman handed her a little money and a meal. It was enough. Elena returned to the abandoned building, exhausted but relieved. What she saw next stopped her in her tracks. Victor, the beggar, sat quietly on his bed with a tattered book in his hands, reading. He looked up and greeted her warmly. She smiled faintly and handed him a food pack she had saved from the restaurant. "I kept this for you, in case you didn't get a meal today," she said. Victor's eyes widened in disbelief. Slowly he reached out and accepted it, holding it as though it was a rare treasure. "Thank you, truly," he whispered. She settled onto her carton bed, but her mind raced. She had never seen a beggar reading a book before. Curiosity burned within her. "You speak so well," she asked softly. "How did you end up here, begging on the street?" Victor took a slow breath. "Life is unpredictable," he murmured. "One moment you have everything. The next, it's all gone." His words pierced Elena's heart. It was as though he understood her own pain. She wanted to ask more, but he set his empty plate aside and lay down to sleep. Elena closed her eyes too, though her thoughts refused to rest. Days slowly turned into weeks, and Elena began to form a new routine. The abandoned building became her shelter. From the little wages she earned, she managed to buy a bucket, a few basic items, and a small bar of soap. Each morning, she would rise before dawn, bathe quickly at the back of the structure, and then hurry off to the roadside restaurant where she washed dishes tirelessly. The job was exhausting, the pay was meager, but at least it kept her alive. And every evening, when work was done, she returned home with a small food pack tucked carefully in her bag. No matter how tired or hungry she felt, she always kept a portion aside for Victor. Each time she handed him food, his eyes would soften as if he couldn't believe anyone cared for him that much. Slowly, an unspoken bond grew between them. Every night, after dinner, they would sit together and talk about life, about people, about dreams. Elena sometimes found herself laughing, even smiling, feelings she thought had long vanished. Victor too seemed to wait eagerly for her return each day, his joy obvious whenever she walked through the doorway. One particular evening, as the fading light cast shadows on the cracked walls, Victor turned to her with seriousness in his eyes. "Elena," he said quietly, "how did you end up like this? You don't look like a woman who belongs on the streets. Isn't life supposed to be kind to those with a good heart?" She froze. They had spoken about many things, the world, their thoughts, their hopes, but never about themselves. No one had ever asked her that question since she lost everything. Most people didn't care enough to ask. But something about Victor's gentle voice made her want to speak. After a long silence, she began. "I grew up in an orphanage. I never knew my parents. I never even saw their faces. By the time I turned 20, the home told me I had to leave. I was lucky they kept me that long, they said it was because they cared for me." Victor listened without interrupting, his eyes fixed on her, as if her words mattered more than anything else in the world. "When I left the orphanage, I was fortunate to find work at a small clothing store. I swept floors, folded dresses, and did whatever was asked. I saved every little coin, hoping that one day I could build something better for myself." A faint smile touched her lips, but it quickly vanished. 3 years later, I had managed to save a good amount. I had also learned the business well, so I opened my own store. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. I rented a small apartment and, for once, I felt like life was finally smiling at me. Her voice broke slightly. Then I met Clara. She grew up in the same orphanage. She was warm, affectionate. Like the sister I never had. I trusted her with everything. She became my only family. Tears began to gather in her eyes. She took a deep breath and continued. "But Clara betrayed me. She told me about an investment opportunity with a large fashion company called Harrington. I was naive. I believed her. I put in all my savings, even took a bank loan with my shop as collateral. Clara disappeared with the money." Elena's voice cracked. "Some months later, the bank came for my store. My rent expired. I was thrown out of my home. The landlord seized what little I had left. And that's how I ended up here, with nothing." Victor sat silently. His heart clenched as he listened. Why would anyone destroy the life of an orphan who had worked so hard to survive? He felt his own eyes grow wet, though Elena couldn't see in the dark. Finally, he whispered, "Betrayal, it cuts deeper than any blade." Startled by the sharpness of his tone, Elena looked at him, surprised. His voice had never sounded like that before. But before she could reply, he softened again. "You're stronger than you think. Not many could endure what you've endured. Don't ever forget that." That night, after she drifted into sleep, Victor lay awake, watching her rest. He saw her clutch her bag under her head like it was the only thing she had left in the world. He felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. He remembered the day they met, her tired face, her hunger, yet she had still shared her meal with him. Even after finding work, she continued to save a portion for him, though she owed him nothing. While the rest of the world looked at him like dirt, she had looked at him as human. Slowly, his heart had begun to attach itself to her. Every morning he found himself waiting eagerly for her smile before she went to work. Every evening, he waited for her footsteps, her laughter, her presence. She had become a light in his otherwise lonely world. Elena too felt a closeness growing. But one thing always puzzled her. No matter how early she woke up, Victor was never in the building. His bed was always empty. Yet, the moment she stepped outside to leave for work, he would be there by the roadside, already sitting with his cracked plate, begging. It left her curious, unsettled even. Where did he always go so early? One night, unable to sleep, she made a decision. She would stay awake and watch. She would pretend to be asleep, wait until he left, and follow quietly. Hours dragged by. Her eyelids grew heavy, but she fought the sleep. Then, just past midnight, Victor sat up silently, like someone trained to move without sound. He rose, walked toward the entrance, and slipped outside into the night. Elena's heart pounded. She tiptoed after him, peered into the darkness, but he was gone. All she saw in the distance was the fading glow of car headlights disappearing down the road. She returned inside, her head spinning with questions. Who was Victor really? Why did he disappear every night? She finally drifted into uneasy sleep, not knowing that danger had slipped in while she rested. A venomous snake had crawled into the abandoned building. As she slept, it struck her ankle with its fangs. The next morning, Victor sat by the roadside in his usual spot, a cracked plate before him. He waited anxiously for Elena to appear as she always did before heading to work. Her greetings had become his daily joy. But this morning was different. Time passed, and she didn't come. At first, he told himself she might just be late. But unease gnawed at him. Something felt terribly wrong. Unable to wait any longer, he hurried back inside the building. What he saw froze him in place. Elena lay weakly on the cartons, drenched in sweat, her breath shallow, her body trembling. Her eyes opened faintly at the sound of his footsteps, but pain clouded them. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Victor's heart raced. He rushed to her side, panic in his voice. Elena. He touched her forehead, it was burning hot. Then his eyes fell on her ankle. 2 small puncture marks. A snake bite. Fear tore through him. For the first time in many years, he felt genuine terror, not for himself but for her. He couldn't lose her. Without hesitation, he ran to a corner of the building and pulled out a leather pouch hidden inside a hollow block. With trembling hands, he opened it and took out a sleek, expensive phone. He had kept it hidden for emergencies like this. With shaking fingers, he dialed a number. His voice, sharp and commanding, filled the silence. This is Victor Harrington. Send an ambulance and a car to the abandoned building on the east side. Hurry, a life depends on it. And alert the doctors to be ready. He dropped the phone and rushed back to Elena, holding her hand. Stay with me, Elena. Keep breathing. Within minutes, an ambulance and a black luxury SUV screeched to a stop outside the building. Medics in white rushed in with a stretcher. They lifted Elena carefully. From the SUV, 3 men in black suits emerged. Onlookers had already gathered, staring in confusion. Why was a beggar commanding such urgency and respect? Victor ignored them all. His only concern was Elena. The ambulance raced through the city, straight to St. Christopher's Hospital, the most prestigious and expensive medical center in Calabar, a place reserved only for the powerful and wealthy. Victor's secret was unraveling. There was no turning back. The ambulance doors burst open at St. Christopher's Hospital, the most prestigious, high-class medical facility in all of Calabar. This was no ordinary place, only the rich and powerful ever walked these halls. The flashing lights outside, the sleek black SUV behind them, and the men in suits made people stare in confusion. What business did a supposed beggar have here? Inside, Elena was wheeled in swiftly on a stretcher. Victor walked beside her, his face tight with fear. Doctors lined the corridor, nurses bowed slightly as he passed, and uniformed security officers straightened like soldiers saluting a commander. The hospital director himself came rushing forward, his voice trembling. "Mr. Harrington, is everything all right?" Victor barely nodded. "See to her immediately. She needs urgent care." Elena, weak and fading in and out of consciousness, caught fragments of what was happening. Her mind spun. Why was everyone looking at Victor with such respect? Why were they calling him Mr. Harrington? None of it made sense. Moments later, she was rolled into a pristine hospital ward. Her eyes fluttered shut under the weight of fever and pain, but not before she caught one last glimpse of Victor's face, filled with fear, love, and desperation. Hours passed. When Elena finally woke, she found herself lying on a soft hospital bed. The air was cool, the room furnished luxuriously, more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. Then her eyes settled on the man sitting at her bedside. Her breath caught. Victor. But not the Victor she knew. Gone were the filthy rags and messy hair. Instead, he wore a tailored suit, his hair neatly cut, a gold watch gleaming on his wrist. He looked like someone from another world entirely. Her heart raced. "Victor," she whispered weakly. Instantly, he stood and leaned toward her, relief flooding his face. "You're awake." "Thank God you're awake," he said, his voice shaking with joy. But Elena's mind swirled with confusion. She blinked again and again, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The man she had thought was a beggar, now looked like royalty. "Victor. I don't understand. What's going on? Who are you, really?" Victor's expression turned heavy. He pulled a chair closer, sat beside her, and took a deep breath. His hands trembled slightly. It was as if this moment, the one he had avoided for so long, had finally caught up to him. "Elena," he said softly, "I'm sorry. You deserve to know the truth." His eyes searched hers, vulnerable yet firm. "All my life, I've been surrounded by people who wanted only one thing from me, my money. From the moment they meet me, they don't see my soul or my heart. They only see the cars, the mansions, the name Harrington." His voice cracked slightly. "Friends, lovers, they all smiled at me, but I knew the truth. Behind their smiles, it was never me they wanted. It was what I had. My wealth." Elena stared at him silently, her heart pounding. "Do you know what it feels like to be adored for everything you own, but not for who you are? To feel like the entire world is a lie?" He shook his head. "I grew tired of it. I needed to know if real kindness still existed. If anyone could ever care for me without looking at my riches." He paused, then continued with raw emotion. "So I did the unthinkable. I stripped myself of everything, the cars, the mansions, the tailored suits. I put on torn clothes and walked the streets. I became a beggar." Elena's lips parted in disbelief. Her mind flashed back to their first meeting, a man in rags holding out a plate, asking for food. "For months I lived like that. Under the scorching sun by day, on a broken bed in an abandoned building by night. Every day I hoped, prayed, that someone would see me, not for what I had, but for who I was." He swallowed hard, pain flashing in his eyes. "But the world was cruel. People spat on me, mocked me, shoved me aside like I was trash. I began to believe real kindness no longer existed." His hand trembled as he reached for hers. "And then, you came." Tears pooled in Elena's eyes as memories rushed back. That day by the roadside, her hunger, her anger, her guilt, and how she had given him half of her rice. "You didn't have much, yet you still shared with me," Victor continued. "You saw me not as filth, not as a beggar, but as a human being. Do you know what that did to me, Elena? That day you gave me something money could never buy. You gave me hope." His voice broke as tears slipped down his cheeks. You didn't stop there. Every day you brought me food. You spoke with me. You trusted me with your story. You asked nothing in return. Do you know how rare that is? Elena's heart tightened. She remembered every evening in the abandoned building, their long talks, his quiet smile. At first, I told myself it was gratitude I felt. But soon I realized it was more. I found myself waiting for your smile each morning, your laughter each night. I worried when you were late. Without even knowing it, Elena. I was falling in love with you. Victor's confession filled the room with raw honesty. His eyes locked onto hers, full of emotion. You are the only one who saw me when I had nothing. And for that, Elena, you are the most precious person in my life. For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Elena's heart twisted. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, yet a louder voice inside her screamed. Memories of betrayal rose like shadows. Clara's deceit, the pain of being stabbed in the back. Her hand jerked away from his. Victor's face fell. Victor, she said brokenly, do you know what you've done? How could you? His brows furrowed in confusion. I don't understand. I told you the truth because. No, she cried, cutting him off. The truth? You call this truth? From the very first day, you lied to me. Every single night we sat together, every conversation we shared, it was built on a lie. You were pretending all along. Victor's chest tightened. It wasn't like that. Yes, I hid my identity, but my heart, my feelings for you, they were always real. Do you even know what betrayal feels like? Elena's voice shook with anger and pain. I trusted Clara, and she destroyed my life. And then you, even when I poured out my story to you, even when I told you how much her lies broke me, you still hid the truth. You had a choice, Victor, but you chose to deceive me. Her tears fell freely now. If you truly cared, you would have told me the night I opened up to you. Instead, you kept me in the dark. How can I ever trust you again? I don't know if my heart can survive another betrayal. Victor's heart shattered. He tried to reach for her, but she turned away. Thank you for helping me, but please, I want to be alone, she whispered through her tears. Victor stood there in silence. He could see it wasn't rejection, but her pain speaking. Quietly, he walked out of the ward. Inside, he made a vow, that he would spend every day proving himself worthy of her trust. 2 days later, Elena was discharged from the hospital. When she returned to the abandoned building, she was surprised. Windows had been fixed, a wooden door installed. Yet despite the changes, it was still the same place she had come to know as home. She had nowhere else to go, so she stayed, resuming her dishwashing job at the roadside restaurant. Victor did not give up. Every evening he came by, waiting for her to return from work. Sometimes he left small gifts, a bed, a blanket, things to make her stay more comfortable. Other times, he simply sat quietly, hoping for a chance to speak with her. But Elena turned her face away, refusing to let her wounded heart soften. Even at the restaurant, Victor would appear. Not dressed as the billionaire everyone knew, but as a humble man choosing to eat local food, all for the chance to see her face. His persistence was quiet, patient, steady. Meanwhile, in another corner of the city, Clara reclined on an expensive sofa in her glittering apartment, sipping red wine as she watched her widescreen television. Every detail of her home screamed wealth and pride. Then a headline caught her eye. Calabar billionaire Victor Harrington seen with mystery woman after months of disappearance. Who is she? The image on the screen showed Victor walking beside a woman outside St. Christopher's Hospital. The angle made them look close, almost intimate. Clara's hand froze around her glass. Elena, she whispered, fury flashing in her eyes. That little street rat? I thought I had finished her. Her heart raced with jealousy and rage. She paced the room, her thoughts boiling. The sight of Victor and Elena together was unbearable. Then, with a cruel smile, she sat down again. She thinks she's special because Victor Harrington picked her up from the gutter. She'll never rise above me. Never. I'll destroy whatever bond they share. Clara reached for her phone, scrolled through her contacts, and dialed an old connection. Her voice turned cold. She needed information on Elena's whereabouts, and she intended to use it. That evening, Elena sat alone in the abandoned building. Though she had kept her distance from Victor, her heart had been wrestling with itself. His persistence, his quiet acts of care, the security man she noticed lingering at night to watch over the place, all of it stirred emotions she tried to bury. Memories of Clara's betrayal still haunted her, warning her not to trust, not to love, not to open her heart again. But then she thought of Victor, the man who had stripped himself of wealth just to test the kindness of the world, who had humbled himself each night to sit with her, who had smiled even when she pushed him away. Tears filled her eyes as she admitted to herself, maybe, not everyone was like Clara. Just then, footsteps echoed at the entrance. Victor appeared, as he always did, quietly waiting. But this time, Elena didn't turn her face away. She lifted her head, her voice trembling but soft. Victor. I've been so afraid to let anyone close again. Every time I tried, I was hurt. But you've shown me something different. You didn't walk away when I pushed you aside. You didn't turn cold when I doubted you. Instead, you stayed. You made me feel safe again. I know about the security guard at night. I know it was you. You've proven your heart is real. And I don't want to keep running anymore. I care for you. And I think I'm ready. Victor froze, hardly believing his ears. His heart leapt with joy. Gently, he took her hands and pressed them to his lips. His voice quivered with emotion. You don't know what this means to me, Elena. I've waited for this moment. You are all I've ever wanted, someone genuine, someone true. And for the first time, they embraced. Not as a billionaire and a homeless woman, but as two souls meant to find one another. Soon after, Victor rented a beautiful apartment for Elena in the city and set her up with a new fashion business, even larger than the one she had lost years ago. For the first time in so long, Elena felt happiness returning, her heart at peace. But trouble was never far behind. One evening, as Elena arranged clothes in her shop, a familiar voice called her name. She turned, and froze. Clara stood there, dressed elegantly in a fine gown, jewels glittering on her neck, her smile painted with false sweetness. Clara? Elena gasped. What are you doing here? Clara stepped closer, tears streaming down her cheeks, but her eyes were too polished, too rehearsed. Elena, I'm sorry. I was wrong back then. I let greed blind me. I lost the only sister I ever had. Please, forgive me. Her voice cracked so convincingly that even a stranger might have believed her. But Elena knew better. Why now? She asked suspiciously. After everything you did? Clara sobbed louder. Because I regret it. I've changed. Truly. I can't sleep knowing how much I hurt you. I've searched for you for months. Please, give me another chance. Elena studied her carefully. The Clara she knew never apologized. And her timing? Too perfect. Just days after Victor had opened the new store for her. Elena needed no proof, she could sense Clara's intentions. Still, she offered a seat. Sit down. Then she slipped quietly into her office. While Clara admired the shop, scheming in her heart, Elena was already dialing Victor's number. Minutes later, Victor arrived, this time with police officers. Without hesitation, they placed handcuffs on Clara. You are under arrest for fraud and for using my name to defraud an innocent woman, Victor declared firmly. Clara's eyes widened. She had not expected this. As the officers dragged her away, her mask cracked. She screamed at Elena, her words sharp and venomous. From the moment you stepped into that orphanage, everyone loved you. And me? I was cast aside. You had favor, kindness, and gifts. I had nothing but rejection. Yes, I stole from you. Yes, I destroyed you, because life was unfair. Everything you had should have been mine. I'll never let you rise above me. Her voice shook with rage and envy. Elena, calm but firm, stepped closer. Clara. I forgive you. I'm sorry life has been cruel to you. But hurting me won't make your life better. For the first time, Clara's proud exterior crumbled. She broke down in tears as the officers dragged her into the police van. Victor looked at Elena, admiration shining in his eyes. Her grace, even toward her enemy, only deepened his love. 5 months later, Victor and Elena were married in a quiet but beautiful ceremony. Their love, forged in the most unlikely circumstances, finally blossomed openly. Together, they built a life filled with peace, laughter, and trust. Clara, on the other hand, faced the full weight of her choices. Convicted of fraud and several other crimes, she was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Her bitterness and envy had led her down a path of destruction, but her downfall became a warning that deceit never triumphs in the end. For Elena, the wounds of betrayal finally began to heal. She had once been cast into the streets with nothing but heartbreak, yet now she stood tall again, stronger, wiser, and no longer afraid to love. And for Victor, the man who had once hidden behind rags to test the world, his search was over. He had found what he had longed for, a woman who valued his heart over his wealth, someone who could love him for who he truly was. The lesson of their story is clear. True love looks beyond riches and appearances. Victor disguised himself as a beggar to discover if genuine care still existed. Elena's compassion and honesty touched him more deeply than money ever could, proving that real relationships are built on trust, character, and sincerity, not material possessions. Integrity always outlasts betrayal. Elena endured Clara's deception, yet never lost her own kindness and patience. In the end, truth and goodness prevailed, while envy and lies crumbled. Now I'd love to hear from you. Which part of this story spoke to your heart the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget, another powerful and emotional story is coming very soon. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss it. If this story moved you, please like, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe with notifications on so you'll always be the first to see new uploads. Thank you sincerely for watching and for being part of this journey. See you again in the next story.